Good evening, everyone. Welcome to our January 9th, 2023. This is the organizational meeting for the Medina City Schools Board of Education. This meeting is a meeting of the Board of Education in public for the purpose of conducting the school district's business and is not to be considered a public community meeting. If everybody would rise and join me in reciting the Pledge of Allegiance. Pledge of Allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
And Mr. Chambers, conduct roll.
Mr. Nichols.
Present.
Ms. Parkhurst.
Here.
Ms. Pritchard.
Here.
Mr. Ross.
Here.
Mr. West.
Here.
And if I can get a motion to appoint Mrs. Rebecca Parkhurst as our president for the 2023 calendar year.
I'll put a motion to appoint Rebecca Parkhurst as the president for the 2023 year.
I'll second that.
Discussion from the board? Hearing none. Mr. Chambers.
Oh, Mr. Ross, if
Yes.
you want to just ask for any other nominations as well at this time.
Okay.
Ask the board if there are any other nominations.
Got it. Are there any other nominations for this position? Hearing none. Any further discussion? Hearing none. Mr. Chambers.
Mr. Nichols.
Aye.
Mr. West.
Yes.
Ms. Pritchard.
Aye.
Mr. Ross.
Aye.
Ms. Parkhurst.
Abstain.
Over there. Get the camera angle.
Yeah, we got it. Thank you. Good, thank you.
Please raise your right hand. Thank you. Repeat after me. I, Rebecca Parkhurst,
I, Rebecca Parkhurst,
solemnly swear that I will support the Constitution of the United States and the Constitution of the State of Ohio,
solemnly swear that I will support the Constitution of the United States and the Constitution of the State of Ohio,
and that I will faithfully and impartially discharge my duties as President of the Board of Education of Medina City School District, Medina County, Ohio,
and that I will faithfully and impartially discharge my duties as President of the Board of Education of Medina City School District, Medina County, Ohio,
to the best of my ability and in accordance with the laws now in effect and hereinafter to be enacted
to the best of my ability and in accordance with the laws now in effect and hereinafter to be enacted.
during my continuance in said office and until my successor is elected and qualified.
During my continuance in said office and until my successor is elected and qualified. Thank you. I'm sorry. Thank you. Thank you. It is my honor and privilege to serve as the Medina City Schools Board of Education President. At this time, I will open the floor up to nominations for the office of Vice President.
I'll make a motion. We elect Ms. Jean Pritchard as our school board vice president.
I'll second.
Thank you, Mr. Ross. Thank you, Mr. Nichols. Are there any other nominations? If there are no other nominations or questions or comments from the board, I'll ask Mr. Chambers to call roll, please.
Yes, Mr. Ross.
Aye.
Mr. Nichols.
Aye.
Mr. West.
Aye.
Ms. Parkhurst.
Aye.
Ms. Pritchard.
Abstain.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank God.
Raise your right hand. Repeat after me.
Okay.
I, Jean Pritchard,
I, Jean Pritchard,
solemnly swear that I will support the Constitution of the United States and the Constitution of the State of Ohio,
solemnly swear that I will support the Constitution of the United States and the Constitution of the State of Ohio,
that I will faithfully and impartially discharge my duties as Vice President of the Board of Education of Medina City School District, Medina County, Ohio.
and I will faithfully and impartially discharge my duties as Vice President of the Board of Education of Medina City School District, Medina County, Ohio,
To the best of my ability and in accordance with the laws now in effect and hereinafter to be enacted.
and to the best of my ability and in accordance with the laws now in effect and hereinafter to be enacted
During my continuance in said office and until my successor is elected and qualified.
during my continuance in said office and until my successor is elected and qualified. Thank you.
Congratulations, Ms. Pritchard.
Thank you. I look forward to working with you, Mrs. Parkhurst, the rest of the board, but particularly the students and the residents of the school district.
Thank you. At this time, we're moving on to our consent agenda. Would someone like to make a motion to approve the consent agenda?
Make a motion, we approve our consent agenda for tonight.
I'll second.
Thank you, Mr. Ross. Thank you, Mr. West. Are there any questions, comments, additions, removals to the agenda? Hearing none. Mr. Chambers.
Mr. Ross?
Aye.
Mr. West?
Yes.
Mr. Nichols?
Aye.
Ms. Pritchard?
Aye.
Ms. Parkhurst?
Aye.
Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Sable.
First item is a resolution to set the time, date, and place of the regular board meetings per Ohio Revised Code 331315. In accordance with Ohio Revised Code 331315, unless otherwise notified, all regular monthly meetings will begin at a time to be determined and will be held at the Medina High School Professional Development Center. An executive session, which is closed to the public, may be held prior to or after the public meeting. Work sessions will be called as a special meeting and held if necessary. I would like to point out that we did put in here that the time to be determined, we left that for discussion this evening. Currently, we hold our meetings at 6 o'clock. There had been some preliminary conversation individually about the potential of moving the board meeting to an earlier time of either 5:30 or 5 o'clock, and wanted to leave that for discussion tonight before putting an actual time in. So now would be the time to have that discussion.
I guess I just worry about the folks that want to attend and they're at work, especially at 5 o'clock. Most people end, I would say, around 5, and they're traveling home. So, I don't know. I think I like 6 o'clock, to be honest with you. I don't think it's an issue, but I don't know how the others feel, but just my thoughts.
Yeah, I think 6 o'clock is fine. I mean, we've been doing it for how long? If we wanted to move a little bit earlier, I mean, we could do possibly 5:30, but I think to cater to the public, we need to make sure that the public participation is after 6 o'clock to ensure people that might miss the first round or two of votes that we have for the night can still participate later on.
For me personally, 6 works best for me from a personal standpoint. I see the point on the public because a lot of us don't get off until like 5 o'clock. So, but I can make earlier work, but 6 works best for me personally speaking. So.
I like the 6 mainly because people are working, and if they are coming in from anywhere where there's a lot of traffic and just Route 18 getting from one side of town to the other, I just think it works better. But again, I mean, I wouldn't have, if we ever have a work session going earlier, because since there isn't going to be public participation, but the regular meeting, I like to keep it 6.
Okay.
Sounds like 6. I was hoping for a compromise of 5:30, but it sounds like 6 o'clock is going to be it. Thank
Okay.
you.
So we'll set that for 6 o'clock, and Mr. Chambers is making note of that for the record. Number 2, set compensation for board members. It is recommended that the Board of Education set their compensation at the maximum level provided in the Ohio Revised Code and the Ohio Constitution, and that's Ohio Revised Code 3313.12. That compensation rate is $125 per meeting. I don't think that has been increased in the 8 years I've been in the district. I just think it's important to mention the large amount of work that our board members do for our students, staff, community, and our district at really a very small rate, because that reimbursement for their time and efforts does not go into effect for all the activities and participation that occurs outside of these meetings. So thank you all. Number 3, bond approval. It is recommended that the Board of Education accept the bond presented by the treasurer as stated below. The treasurer shall present his bond in the amount of $500,000 for approval by the board. The approved bond shall be deposited with the board president and a copy filed with the county auditor. And this is basically an insurance policy for the treasurer in performing his duties. Number 4 is a resolution for liability insurance for the business manager. It is recommended that the Board of Education approve the resolution for the purchase of a liability insurance policy in the amount of $50,000 to insure the board against liability of the business manager. The business manager shall present the insurance policy to the board president. This liability is very similar to what is being recommended for the treasurer. The reason why you see these being presented to the board and being required to be presented to the board is because of the amount of funds and the size of purchases that occur through the business department as well as the treasurer's offices. So it's for accountability purposes. Number 5, Board Service Fund. Per Board Policy 0147, the board shall establish a Board Service Fund which shall not exceed the greater of $2 per enrolled student or $20,000. The Board Service Fund shall be set aside from the general fund on an annual basis by resolution of the board and shall be used to pay expenses actually incurred by board members in performance of their official duties. So this provides reimbursement for professional development, potential travel such as to Columbus for workshops and or meetings. Number 6 are standing resolutions. It is recommended that the following standing resolutions be approved. Advances on tax settlements, authorization of the treasurer to secure advances from the auditor when funds are available and payable to the school district. Number 2, investment of inactive funds, authorization for the treasurer to invest inactive funds at the most productive interest rate whenever inactive funds are available. Number 3, authorizing superintendent to hire staff between board meetings, to authorize the superintendent during periods when this board is not in session to make offers of employment directly to candidates for either teaching or non-teaching positions on behalf of this board, subject to a subsequent vote of ratification by this board, provided, however, that upon ratification by this board, the employment shall be deemed effective as of the date and time of the employee's acceptance of the superintendent's offer. Nothing in this resolution shall require the Board of Education to employ or continue to employ an individual who has not provided a criminal records check satisfactory to the board or who has not satisfied any other prerequisite to employment created by law or board policy. The authorization provided by this resolution shall remain in effect until withdrawn by formal action of this board. Number 4, authorizing superintendent to accept resignations. To authorize the superintendent on behalf of this board to accept resignations which have been submitted by employees during times when the board is not in session, subject to ratification by this board, provided, however, that upon ratification by this board, such resignation shall be deemed effective as of the date and time of the superintendent's acceptance. The authorization provided by this resolution shall remain in effect until withdrawn by formal action of this board. Number 5, approve district purchasing agents, appoint the superintendent or designee and the treasurer as district purchasing agents. Number 7, resolution, public records training. It is recommended that the Board of Education adopt the resolution to appoint David Chambers, treasurer, as the Medina City Schools Board of Education's designee to attend public records training pursuant to Ohio Revised Code 149.43 and Ohio Revised Code 109.43. Number 8, mileage reimbursement for 2023. It is recommended that the Board of Education establish the district mileage rate reimbursement for 2023 to be the current IRS mileage rate on the date of travel. Employment of legal counsel. It is recommended that the Board of Education employ the following firms as our legal counsel to the board on an as-needed basis. The following recommendations, there are no changes to these recommendations. These are the same legal counsel that we have historically used in the past. There's multiple legal counsels listed as we utilize them for varying purposes and expertise. Number 10, OSBA membership. It is suggested that the Board of Education renew membership in the Ohio School Boards Association for 2023. And number 11, it is recommended that the Board of Education select the Board of Education President to serve as the delegate and the Board of Education Vice President to serve as the alternate representing the board at the 2023 OSBA Annual Business Meeting.
I'll make a motion to approve action item E.
Second.
Thank you, Mr. Nichols. Thank you, Ms. Pritchard. Any comments, questions from the board? Hearing none, Mr. Chambers?
Yes, Mr. Nichols?
Aye.
Ms. Pritchard?
Aye.
Mr. Ross?
Aye.
Mr. West?
Yes.
Ms. Parkhurst?
Aye.
Thank you.
Thank you.
The next list of committees, superintendent committee appointments, these do not require board approval as they are superintendent committees. So these are for informational and or discussional purposes. It is recommended that the Board of Education appoint Joseph Nichols, I'm sorry, Joe, and Rebecca Parkhurst to serve as representatives of the board on the Medina City Schools Curriculum and Instruction Committee. For facilities, we're looking at appointing Ron Ross and Andrew West to serve as representatives. For the Finance Committee, we're looking at appointing Joseph Nichols as well as Andrew West for the Finance Committee. And for the Policy Committee, we have Rebecca Parkhurst as well as Jean Pritchard. Business Advisory, we are appointing Joseph Nichols as well as Ron Ross. And number 6, for the curriculum instruction, it is recommended that the board appoint Rebecca Parkhurst as well as Joseph Nichols and confirm the following dates for all these committees. And as I'm reading through, I'm realizing I misspoke. These committees do need to be board approved and are open to the public, which is why we're approving the meeting times and dates, which will be listed on our website. So they do need a vote.
No, I'll make a motion to approve the superintendent's committee appointments.
I'll second.
Thank you, Mr. Ross. Thank you, Mr. West. Any comments or questions from the board?
I would just like to say that Josh Nichols is my evil twin. You don't want that guy.
Okay, hearing no other comments or questions, Mr. Chambers, when you're ready, please.
Yes, Mr. Ross?
Aye.
Mr. West?
Yes.
Mr. Nichols?
Aye.
Ms. Pritchard?
Aye.
Ms. Parkhurst?
Aye.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Next is appointment to the Medina County Career Center. It is recommended that the Board of Education appoint Jean Pritchard to serve as a representative of the Medina City Schools to the Board of Medina County Career Center effective 2023 through 2025, and she would be replacing Rebecca Parkhurst. Valerie Pavlik is currently finishing out her term with the Career Center, representing Medina City Schools.
I'll make a motion to approve the Career Center appointment.
I'll second.
Thank you, Mr. Nichols. Thank you, Mr. Ross. Any questions or comments from the board? I have enjoyed my term that I was completing. I think I served a year and a half to finish out Brian Hilberg's term, and I did enjoy serving on the Career Center Board. Ms. Pritchard, I think you will enjoy your time out there and working with the other county board members. Mr. Chambers, roll please.
Mr. Nichols?
Aye.
Mr. Ross?
Aye.
Ms. Pritchard?
Abstain.
Mr. West?
Yes.
And Ms. Parkhurst?
Aye.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And the Recreation Center Committee has recommended that the Board of Education appoint the Assistant Superintendent and the Business Manager to serve as the delegates representing the Medina City Schools at the Medina Community Recreation Center. Board member Ron Ross will serve as the ex officio committee member.
I'll make a motion for the representation for the City and Community Committee for the Rec Center.
I'll second.
Thank you, Mr. Nichols. Thank you, Ms. Pritchard. Comments or questions from the board? Hearing none, Mr. Chambers?
Mr. Nichols?
Aye.
Ms. Pritchard?
Aye.
Mr. Ross?
All abstain?
And Mr. West?
Yes.
And Ms. Parkhurst?
Aye.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And City and Community Committee representation, it is recommended that the Board of Education appoint the Director of Community Relations and the Director of Technology to serve as representatives of the Medina City Schools on the Advisory Commission on Communication Enhancement Support Services. This is related to Medina TV.
I'll make a motion to approve this, to approve the Advisory Commission on Communication recommendation by the superintendent.
I'll second.
Thank you, Mr. Ross. Thank you, Mr. Nichols. Any questions or comments from the board? Hearing none, Mr. Chambers?
Mr. Ross?
Aye.
Mr. Nichols?
Aye.
Ms. Pritchard? I'm
Aye.
sorry, Mr. West?
Yes.
Mr. Pritchard?
Aye.
Ms. Parkhurst?
Aye.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And OSBA liaisons. The first is legislative. It is recommended that the Board of Education select Rebecca Parkhurst to serve as the OSBA legislative liaison. And number 2, it is recommended that the Board of Education select Ronald Ross to serve as the OSBA student achievement liaison.
I'll make a motion to approve these 2 liaisons.
I'll second.
Thank you, Ms. Pritchard. Thank you, Mr. Nichols. Please note that there are meetings down at OSBA conference that we attend in November where we attend the seminars or during that time, and there's usually communication that OSBA also shares with us, that we will share with the board as necessary. Are there any other questions or comments from the board? Okay, hearing them, Mr. Chambers?
Ms. Pritchard?
Aye.
Mr. Nichols?
Aye.
Mr. Ross?
Aye.
Mr. West?
Yes.
Ms. Parkhurst?
Aye.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And last but not least, this is where I jumped ahead in the agenda, superintendent's discussion items. We do have several district committees, which we do ask board members if they'll participate in. And there's 4 of these. We have the Insurance Committee, which we have asked Jean Pritchard to participate in that committee, with Andrew being the alternate. The foundation, we've asked Ron to participate in that committee, with Jean being the alternate. Partnership Council, we've asked Ron to participate, with Joe being the alternate. And then the Performing Arts Center Committee, we've asked Ron to also participate. Boy, Ron, you're doing it all. And Andrew being the alternate. And administration, as it relates to these different committees, will reach out to you in terms of dates so that you can attend. All these committees are relevant to district work or contractual agreements we have with our associations.
I'll make a motion to approve the superintendent committee representation. Oh, no.
Yeah,
Never mind.
actually, we
Need
don't.
one.
we
Never
don't
mind.
need to. But
Never
thank
mind.
you.
I'm not making a motion for that.
But thank you. Okay. That concludes our organizational meeting. We will need to adjourn and vote on our adjournment, and then we will move on to our next meeting.
I make a motion to adjourn.
Thank you, Ms. Pritchard. Thank you, Mr. Ross. Mr. Chambers.
Ms. Pritchard.
Aye.
Mr. Ross.
Aye.
Mr. Nichols.
Aye.
Mr. West.
Yes.
Ms. Parkhurst.
Aye.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I know you jumped ahead then.
All right, if everyone is ready, we will move on to our fiscal year 2024 tax budget hearing. Mr. Chambers, when you are ready, if you will please take roll.
Mr. Nichols.
Here.
Mr. Ross.
Here.
Mr. West.
Here.
Ms. Pritchard.
Here.
Ms. Parkhurst.
Here.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, I just wanted to tell you all that we didn't get information from the county auditor's office until Friday at around 3 o'clock. I think I told you in your board update that we were waiting for information. The estimates that I had on there were fairly good. I had to increase a few numbers on our property tax for general fund to keep the rates of the levies up, but that is for 2024, so I'll get right into it. Your tax budget is basically good for two purposes. One, to set tax rates, and two, to set the amended certificate of estimated resources. Now, tax rates are for the tax year 2023, collection year 2024. So these are for any tax bill that you receive in December of 2023. The amended certificate, if you remember those words, the amended certificate of estimated resources, you may remember that on our audit continuously, I get cited by the state auditors because they want to call it the amended certificate of actual resources. But that is not what it is. The tax budget basically sets the amended certificate, and we adjust it as the year goes along. If you realize what today is January. The amended certificate of resources is not due to the county, to the state auditors until June 30th of 2024. So we're 18 months ahead of the time. So that's why when you say it's an estimated certificate, that's what we're looking at. Schedule B on the tax budget basically lists all your tax levies. Your 30.1 mils is any levy that was voted on by the taxpayers before or on 1976. And then you have your levies that were voted after that individually listed. You also have your bond retirement fund, which is listed below at 3.9 mils. And you can see that that is running for 28 years after the election itself. Schedule 1, again, lists your tax levies, but it also lists what type of levy they are, continuous, inside. Inside means that it wasn't approved by taxpayers, but it is part of what is known as your 10 mil inside mills itself. These are divided among the taxing districts. So a taxing district such as Medina City Schools in Medina City is a taxing district. Medina City Schools in Montville Township is a separate taxing district. So these are the mills that we have in our taxing district as a school district that is not voted by the taxpayer, 4.3 mills. And the rest are all voted by the taxpayer itself, totaling 91.83 mills. Schedule 2 lists your funds that receive property tax millage. Your general fund, your bond retirement fund, and your substitute levy. What we were waiting for on Friday was the amount of monies that we'd received this year for our property taxes so that we could guesstimate what we would receive for next year for our property taxes, because the county auditor will be setting tax rates based on what we guesstimate, and they can't go over the total amount of the millage that was voted in. So if you're looking at 2024, which is what the tax budget does, it's looking at both the January to June and then July to December of 24 to get an amount of roughly $55 million that we're guesstimating the property taxes to bring in, and that's based on valuations and the tax rates itself. The other aspect about it is we're looking at roughly $75 million going out in the calendar year and ending at $4.2 million. Again, these are all rough estimates. We're 18 months ahead of time. So I'm hopeful that we could set our tax rates correctly and move on from there. When you're talking the bond retirement fund, you could see that for 2024, the bond retirement fund, we're estimating around $4.2 million, $4.3 million. And again, we'll be spending around $6 million total. Part of that is the county auditor wants us to list all of our bonds that we're paying off, so you'll see revenues other than property taxes of roughly $1.7 million. And that's in the transfers in. And then finally, you have your substitute levy. Your substitute levy was the former emergency levy that we then passed here in 2018. And we're looking at for calendar year 20, roughly $7.2 million coming in from the levy itself. As you can see, we're spending down on the general fund, we're spending down on the substitute levy, and this is what we told our taxpayers we would be doing. Next page, your statement of fund activity. This is a summary of your amended certificate of estimated resources. You could see we're estimating our beginning balances at $56 million and looking to spend roughly, I believe it's $168 million, and then having expenditures of $135 million, having total available resources of $168 million, for an ending balance of $32 million. Next page is your detail of all that. I don't want to get into much of the detail. If you could look at the detail page, you could go right back up to the summary page itself. Following page is your voted levies. We have 2 voted bonds out there. They're refunded bonds. One is for 2013, the other is for 2015. They both refer to the 1999 bond itself. The one ends in 27 and the other ends in 28. And what we're looking at is the amount required to meet the budget year principal and interest. The budget year is the calendar year the calendar year 2024 that the auditor will set the rates on. So we're looking at the auditor giving us roughly $4.3 million for our bonds in 2024. And then finally, you have a Schedule 5 for tax anticipation notes. At this time, we do not have any tax anticipation notes. Have any questions on the tax budget?
Dave, you said the 10 mills, that outside 10 mills.
Inside millage.
The what?
Inside mills.
Inside, okay, I'm sorry, inside mill. Do all districts get that 10 mills?
all taxing districts, yes. And it's divided between your county, your city, your school district, the county has the library, the county also has the Health and Human Services. And so it's divided amongst all those taxing entities of the taxing district. So all taxing districts have a 10 mil total. Now, when I was working with the Haga County Auditor, believe it or not, the city of Cleveland did not have 10 mills used up by any of their taxing districts. And so we were able to increase the millage of the city of Cleveland without taxpayer approval. So.
Mr. Chambers, remind me, Schedule 3, the statement of fund activity, and then the next page of detail, that is for fiscal year 2024 estimates?
That is for fiscal year 2024, yes.
Thank you.
That is correct. And if you look at it, our fiscal year begins in 2023 and ends in the middle of 2024. You're setting the tax rates on the tax budget for the calendar year 2024. So.
Thank you. Any other questions for Mr. Chambers or comments? Okay. Hearing none, the plan is to adjourn, and then we will approve the tax budget here at the next meeting, which will follow shortly tonight.
I'll make a motion to adjourn.
Thank you. Thank you, Ms. Pritchard. Thank you, Mr. Ross. Mr. Chambers.
Ms. Pritchard?
Aye.
Mr. Ross?
Aye.
Mr. Nichols?
Aye.
Mr. West?
Yes.
Ms. Parkhurst?
Aye.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. I'd like to call to order a special meeting for the Medina City Schools Board of Education. This meeting is a meeting of the Board of Education in public for the purpose of conducting the school district's business and is not to be considered a public community meeting. Mr. Chambers, if you'll please call roll when you're ready.
Mr. Nichols?
Here.
Mr. Ross?
Here.
Mr. West?
Here.
Ms. Pritchard?
Here.
Ms. Parkhurst?
Aye.
Thank you.
Here. Sorry, thank you. Oh, boy, thank you. Are there any additions, removals, or modifications to the agenda for this right now? Okay. Hearing none, if I could get a motion for the consent agenda approval, please?
I'll make a motion to approve action item D1, the adoption of the 2024 tax budget. Is that right?
No, just a motion
Oh,
for
I'm
the
sorry.
consent agenda.
I'll
make a motion for the consent agenda.
Perfect. Thank you, Mr. West.
I'll second for the consent agenda.
Thank you, Mr. Nichols. Mr. Chambers.
Mr. West?
Yes.
Mr. Nichols?
Aye.
Mr. Ross?
Aye.
Ms. Pritchard?
Aye.
Ms. Parkhurst?
Aye.
Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Chambers, you're up when you're ready.
Yes, it's recommended to the board that the board adopt the 2024 tax budget.
I'll make a motion to approve the adoption of the fiscal year 2024 tax budget.
I'll second.
Thank you, Mr. Ross. Thank you, Ms. Pritchard. Any questions or comments? Okay, hearing none. Mr. Chambers.
Mr. Ross?
Aye.
Ms. Pritchard?
Aye.
Mr. Nichols?
Aye.
Mr. West?
Yes.
Ms. Parkhurst?
Aye.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right, thank you. That concludes our organizational meeting, tax hearing, and our special meeting. I believe our next meeting is scheduled for January 23rd. So thank you all for attending, and have a nice evening after we adjourn.
I make a motion to adjourn.
Thank you, Ms.
I'll
Pritchard.
second.
Thank you, Mr. Nichols.
Ms. Pritchard?
Aye.
Mr. Nichols?
Aye.
Mr. Ross?
Aye.
Mr. West?
Yes.
Ms. Parkhurst?
Yes.
Thank you.
Aye. Thank you. Thank you all. Have a good night.